So this is the mobile meow talk. And well, that was probably a better introduction than I was planning on giving for myself. But you know, this is me. I think I did a pretty good job capturing myself. And I'm the web warrior at YouTube, and I work on the HTML5 player. And I'll let Eugene introduce himself.
My name's Eugene. I, like my friend Greg here, work on the HTML5 player at YouTube.
And one thing to notice is this is a pretty accurate capture of what his feet actually look like. So I do ask, you guys should try to get him to take his shoes off at the end. But anyway, so this talk is about video. And traditionally, we do a lot of stuff on the desktop. And at YouTube, it's mostly cats. But you know, out here, you guys might want to do something with bicycles. This is Amsterdam, and they're everywhere. So you know, a little bit of brief history of where YouTube's gone, what technologies we used. You know, we started off with, like I said, cat videos. So here's one of the very early cat videos that we have. Right, so that's where YouTube started with a simple cat video, and so like I said, video on the desktop was sort of our thing. And what did we use in the early days? We used Flash. I mean, that's what everybody did, and it worked really well. Then the browsers got more powerful, they got more fancy, and we went to HTML5 video. And that's sort of where things get exciting and where it sort of ties in more with a lot of the mobile. And like I said, this talk is actually on mobile video. This conference is about mobile. Why is that important? Well, you can see from our numbers here, we're really still seeing mostly desktop playbacks, but this growth tripled from 2010 to 2011, and that's going to keep growing and keep getting bigger and bigger. So mobile is a very important part of serving cat videos to everyone across the world. So what are our options on mobile? Well, we still have Flash as a possibility. We have native, and then we have HTML5 video. And Flash is pretty much the same thing. If you do it on the desktop, it's going to work on your mobile phone as well, except we don't have Flash to use everywhere. So it's kind of not something that we talk about much because it doesn't really make, there's really not much we can do there. So the other thing is we can do native, and this one's pretty simple. We have a couple things to do video. We can use real-time streaming protocol, and we just have a URL like this, and we can serve a video and watch video that way. The other option is to actually use an app, and we can have links in our browser to launch an app that would look something like this. But we can't do this on Windows phones yet. But the interesting stuff is when we get to HTML5 video. It's more powerful, it's more native, and it's more complicated. So most of the time, now I know this is a mobile conference, and you guys don't think of it like this. You guys know that there's a bunch of other things out there. But a lot of times at work, you're talking to somebody in marketing, they're like, oh, it's on my iPhone or it's on my Android. And really we have to explain, well, we have a lot of different browsers out there on a lot of different phones. And we have to worry about even things like feature phones that have Opera Mini. And at the end of the day, you guys all know, we've talked about, the other speakers have talked about, this is really just a sample. There's really a lot more out there. So it's time to get serious. Let's actually talk about doing video. So where do we start? Well, just a simple video tag. And so the first thing we want to do is add a source. And that seems simple enough, right? Well, we actually need to worry about what format it is. So do we use WebM, H.264, OGG? There's a couple other things that we can use. And this is sort of just a graph of the breakdown of the formats that we worry about at YouTube, WebM, H.264, and HLS. And the important things to notice here is really just that this one's the most green, and so that's sort of the one that we prefer, and that's going to hit most of our users. And certainly WebM is getting more traction. We're having more phones with it. But if you were to look at the distribution of Android users, most of them are still on 2.3, and they don't have WebM support there. The only thing that you need WebM for really is Firefox here. So it is important to have both so that when you serve video to all your users, they'll all be able to watch their cat videos. So we can do something simple like this, 2 source tags, and just And then the question is, which one do we put first? And well, to decide that, it's actually power, I think, is the most interesting thing. And so this is just a picture of one of our data centers. We power them by cats, of course. And, oh, it didn't want to play. No, that's fine. We have a little thing that dispenses treats for them, but anyway, so this is a graph of power consumption and with video playback in different kinds of modes. This guy, Yossi Oren, put this together for us, a great guy in Tel Aviv who does research on power consumption. And the important things to notice here are flash. The flash stuff is very high, takes up a lot of power, and the hardware versions of WebM and H.264 are very small. And so it's more important to, if you have hardware to have the playback to decode your video, that's always going to win over the software versions. Now this device that he tested this on was one that's available in China, and it actually has WebM hardware. I believe it's the only device out at the moment that has this, although we do expect to see more coming out. And so these numbers are really high. This is the first version. We do expect them to come down and improve once they've iterated. So now let's actually, stick this in a page and see what happens. So I have a very simple page here. All it has is a video tag with a couple sources in it, and very, very simple stuff. So what happens? The browsers sort of give you a quick example. You can see that they've already started. You can see that they're changing a little bit. They don't all handle it the same way, and really out of these, the only one that looks like a video player is iOS, is the iPhone. The other ones, they're just a white box. Opera, has a black box for where the video would be, which tells you that there's something there. But yeah, this is the only one that actually gives you an idea that you're looking at a video. And so then, and we haven't even been, we can't actually even play half of these at this point yet. So I can go into a lot of detail about, what the differences are. I don't think it's that important. You guys these slides will be up online later, and you guys can read through all the differences that we found. But what's important is, what you want to do in order to make sure that your product works the same way on every phone. So the next thing that we want to do is, we can give it a poster attribute, and we can actually want to click on it to play, and once again, we can see here that the browsers, pretty much, it's the same thing. We still can't really tell that any of these are videos, that we can interact with them, that we can play with them. And once again, I have a bunch of differences. So what do you want to do? What's important to know after all, with all these differences? Well, it's really that you want to create your own cute state. To convey to the user, this is a video, I can click on it, I can play it. So we urge you to do this. And so at YouTube, we just have a nice black and red play button that tells the user, yeah, this is a video, we can use it. We also recommend that you set the background color to black, because with a lot of these browsers, they're going to set the background color for you, and sometimes you can't overwrite them. So that's something that's important. So now I'm going to give it back over to Eugene, and he'll talk about controls.
So Greg has showed us how to get a basic video implementation up on a page. We can even interact with it so much as having it start playing and pausing. Now let's get into giving the user some control. The simplest way to do this is by typing those 8 letters after your video tag, the controls attribute. What that's going to do is that's going to give you native controls. Now, native controls are implemented in every browser that has video implemented. And they look something like this. This is the breakdown of their features. Visually, there's some differences. You can see that all of them share the play and pause button functionality and the C bar functionality. The rest really vary between devices. Now, thanks. What we want to do is get rid of this ambiguity here, because this makes me nervous, right? There's a lot of things to account for here, and we can do it better, right? So we want to create custom controls. We do this for 2 reasons. we want to preserve your brand, right? So if Bill is watching his favorite cat video, say Flugelhorn Feline, and he wants to leave his house. He's watching it on his computer right now. He wants to leave his house and he wants to take his experience on the go. You want him to feel the same comfort looking at his iPhone as he does on his Windows box at home. So that's an important reason. A connected reason is we want all of the different platforms that serve video to have the same controls available. This makes user experience way more unified, and it simplifies testing, right? You don't have all these strange, kind of like if I'm looking at Opera, I have to check this attribute. If I'm looking at iOS, I have to look at this, right? So it simplifies things. So let's take a look at some controls. So we just coded this up real quick. Now this is a big screen, right? And that play button is pretty small on this huge screen. Now imagine this shrunk and fit in the palm of your hand. That's going to be tiny. There's no way you can hit that. So be sure when you're working on mobile to bump things up a little bit. So now we can hit it, a finger. And then our video plays, and everyone is happy. We can seek. Things are great. And now this is an exciting opportunity because we get to unveil to you a secret feature that we've been working on YouTube for some time now. Just trying it out, So say you're watching a video and there's not enough kittens. We're gonna give you the kittens. So every time a kitten is lacking, you can hit that button.
When will it be implemented?
Very soon. Look for it. Yes. So not only do we have kittens, we introduce custom controls for all sorts of different things, right? You can use them for annotations, playlist captions, popping open your settings menu. You can change them around for different contexts like live. Really, tons of stuff that you can do with custom controls. Now some pro tips for custom controls. You'll notice that when you drag your finger along a mobile device, the page moves. So if you expect a user to be able to scrub to a point in the video, you need to disable that as soon as they start scrubbing. Volume APIs are not supported on in every context, like we heard previously. So at this point, don't build the controls for it. Like I mentioned before, your fingers are fat. Use SVGs if you can. That way you can reuse the same images, you can scale them, there'll be no pixelation, it'll be pretty. We all know that you can't hover on a mobile device, so don't build in hover states. And be aware of the full screen context. Now, what do I mean by be aware of the full screen context? So we have this JavaScript API to request full screen called request full screen. Now, when we call that and we pass it in an element, it stretches the element to fill the entire desktop. It's desktop only, and it's browser prefix. So what about mobile? Isn't it already full screen? Well, say you're on an iPad and you're browsing a blog and you want to play a video. Now that video is going to be a tiny section of the page. There's several things you can do about this. You can open the video in a new tab. You'll still have the browser Chrome, but the video will take up the entire screen. Or you can call WebKit enter full screen. Now that's WebKit only, as a prefix might suggest. And it can only be called on the video element. So what that does is it will lose all of your custom controls and bring up the native controls in this full screen playback mode. So that's not very helpful either. Be aware of the size context, because when size changes from device to device, you want to be ready. Do it like that. Greggy, autoplay.
So autoplay is an interesting one on mobile, and so generally when you do this, most people would expect that the video will autoplay. So I took a snapshot of what actually happens, and it's just it doesn't do anything. The browsers ignore it. At least the iPhone does. And so why is this? Well, in their documentation, basically this is what it says, and you basically have to, if you're on something that's going to use a cellular network, you need to the user has to initiate playback somehow with touching the phone. So we don't have autoplay and we don't have preload. So what about everyone else? Well, it looks something like this. Everyone who actually builds the OS or the phone, they don't have autoplay, and we have Firefox and Opera who do at the moment. So pretty much we're not going to get a lot of autoplay on our mobile devices, and this is interesting. You can actually work around it there, but we don't recommend that you do it. So what does that mean, right? So I have to touch it in order to get playback to happen. And this seems pretty simple. I could just easily do that, and that's great. But so the interesting problem is for our embeds, our embedded YouTube videos, we actually don't have the information that we need to be able to start playback right away. So we need a source. And what happens, here's a little graph of the flow of what it looks like for our embeds, how sort of they go and make decisions. The important thing here is the thing in the top. Basically, we wait until the user clicks in order to fetch all this information, what source, what streams can they play H.264 and WebM and stuff. And this is because most of them don't get clicked on and don't get played. So now when that information returns, that thread is not going to be user initiated. If we were to just try to call play at that point, it wouldn't work. So how do we work around this? How do we get the video to play when this returns? And it's pretty simple. This is sort of the iOS fix, is you wait for any click event and you call load on your video element. Great, that sort of frees it up. That's like, I can be used at this point, and then we can go fetch our data, and then when it returns and we're not in a user-initiated thread, we can call load again, we can call play, and we'll actually be able to play the video. Now there is a bug in Android. You want to set a timeout around this so that when it actually starts playing, it'll actually start playing. Otherwise, it'll start, but it'll be paused. So that's important to know. So embeds are interesting. Like I said, it comes up a lot with autoplay not having this ability. So how do you embed something? Well, most people think, oh, script tag, and that's great. It's useful in a lot of context. But like I said, we're trying to preserve our brand. We're more than just a video tag. So our stuff needs to be sandboxed. We don't want the users, the embedders, CSS and JavaScript interacting with our player and screwing it up. So script tag doesn't really work too well. Object tags are great. That's what we used to embed Flash for a long time, and you can do that with HTML content as well. But there's no way to interact with it in JavaScript. So this didn't quite work for us. We have an API that we wanted to support that we were going to keep using. So our last option was an iframe, and this has really worked out well. It allows our content to be sandboxed, and we can build our API to communicate with it as well. So what does it look like? It looks something like this. It's pretty simple to build our embeds like that. And one thing that I want to point out is this down here. It's the allow full screen attribute. Today, this does absolutely nothing. But why do we have it there? Well, because these embeds are going to be out in the wild for years. If you look, our old object tags, we still have more of those out there than we do the iframe, even though the iframe's been out for about 1.5 years now. So why did we add this here even though it does nothing? Because we were hoping that those full screen APIs that we mentioned earlier are going to be finalized, and when that happens, all of our embeds that are out in the wild will be able to have these features. So that's something you want to remember when you're giving content to somebody else to put on their site. Plan for the future, but you also don't want to go overboard, because if the standard went a different direction, we would have this empty attribute on all of our embeds, which would just be kind of foolish. So pro tips when you do an iframe, very important. On the HTML element, do an overflow hidden. iOS has some issues, and it might stretch your content a little bit if you don't do this. So just do that right away. Quick, one-liner. We also recommend that on the body tag that you stretch things to take up the entire space, and you change the background color to something that's appropriate for your application. For us, it's black. Because sometimes your embed is going to get resized. It might not get redrawn as quickly as you like, and so you want it to still look appropriate. So just stretch your stuff and set it back in color. The other thing is with video, when you click on it, there's feedback that tells you, hey, you're watching a video now. We'll have a little loading icon. So you don't need this highlighting color to happen on your body, so you can get rid of that too. I'll give it back to Eugene for some testing.
So, how many people here are developers? Excellent. How many of you guys like testing? Okay, some hands. You guys might be excited. How many of you guys like your applications to work all the time? Okay. So here's why we test, right? We want our stuff to work. How do we do it? So you can go out and buy a ton of devices, which is really the only true way to get your app for sure working and performing on that device, right? You just don't know otherwise. This costs a ton of money because you have to go out buy devices. You have to find a place to store those devices. You might want to talk to PPK about that. And it's boring, right? On every device, you have to go test every change that you make. You can test with software. Every major vendor has a version of either an emulator or a simulator app. You know, iOS, Android, Windows. They're a little bit less accurate, right? Because they're approximations. They're not running on the actual hardware. It's just your machine. On the upside, it's just your machine. Now there's some browser simulators also. For video, they're not particularly helpful, unfortunately. So what do? We automate our testing using Selenium, which is a really cool program. I'm sure you guys have seen it for desktop clients. There are two variations now. We have an iOS app for Selenium and an Android one as well. We don't have one for Windows yet. So what this does is it runs your website inside of a native app and allows you to interact with it. So what you can do is you can run your test API. So this is real quick, real easy. You know, just when you set a source in your video tag, make sure the source is there. You know, real snappy. These are the kind of things that you can do right off the bat with testing. You can approximate video playback by checking the current time, you know, making sure that stuff's working. When you're ready to get a little bit more sophisticated, you can use a screen reader to pick up the changes in the DOM. You know, look for buttons changing, look for new titles showing up. And what's really cool and really excites me is this screen cap processing for video. Now, this is a screenshot of how our screen cap processing looks. So we have a video here, and it's encoded with a barcode for every second of the video. So you can verify what second of the video you're on by reading that barcode. And comparing it to current time, you check for, you know, any delays or inconsistencies between the two. And now these four boxes in the corners allow us to make sure that the video is not getting stretched or cropped, right? So we make sure that they're a perfect square, otherwise you either have stretch or cropping your video. Now there's some hardware testing assistance that some people have implemented. And it's pretty neat, right? If you have a machine, you can simulate a finger. Now, I don't know if this is extremely cost effective, right? But it's, but it's pretty neat. If you want to find out more about this thing, look at bitbeam.org or just check the rosters of the Angry Birds. He's up on the top. I think it's back to Greg now.
So let's talk about what's coming next. You know, the things that aren't really out there yet, but what can we look forward to or be in fear of? So the first thing is, you know, things like Windows 8 are coming out, and they've sort of merged this idea that we have touch devices and desktop devices. Now they're kind of together now, and you know, I have like a test device that I can click on and use my keyboard with. So do we listen to the touch events, or do we listen to the mouse events? It gets really complicated. So the first thing that they have pointer events to help solve these issues. Everything's just a pointer, and this is a cool kind of new way to listen to events that I think is really neat. Another thing that's coming out, which I'm really excited about, so one of the features that we have on YouTube is we care a lot about accessibility. We care a lot about our captions and our subtitles, and I think a lot of that is captured in sort of this comic strip. Oh, hi, I'm here from the internet. What are you doing gluing captions to your cats? And so how do we do this on a phone, especially when sometimes we're playing video in full screen and we don't have our controls, we can't build our captions on top. Well, we have the track tag, and so this is pretty neat. There's work being done on this now in Chrome and in IE, and it just allows us to have captions that'll work. Another cool thing about this is we can just add arbitrary metadata to our video that pops up at certain times, and so we can replace some of our timing using the built-in technologies. And the other thing that I want to talk about, which they mentioned this morning, is we're really excited for getting camera access with the Get User Media API, and being able to interact with video in a new way with the camera. And if you want to learn more about all this stuff, what's new, what's coming out, here's just kind of a collection of links. Like I said, this will be up online, so you can look through it later. But I just sort of picked my favorite sort of stuff, and where I sort of pay attention to. Yeah, with that, I think we got time for 2 questions now. So, is there another mic that we can hand him, or oh, you found him. Good, sweet.
Hi. Do you have any numbers regarding native YouTube apps versus mobile HTML5 pages?
We do not have any numbers that we've been approved to talk on for those.
If we do, we can definitely we can check in with HQ and post the numbers on these slides if you are interested.
Okay.
Hi. Have you got any strategies for live video, streaming live video? Seems to be quite difficult connecting.
Yeah. So right now, your option pretty much is HLS, right? You can achieve this in the older phones that support Flash with Flash, or on iOS devices which support it natively. As far as the other browsers, there's some ongoing work with new APIs to allow us to do this, but it's still quite a ways out.
We do have live videos out today on our mobile website, and do we have it on any embeds yet?
I don't know.
Okay, I don't think we have it on embeds, but we've been doing live video on with HLS on our mobile site for quite some time now. I don't remember when it launched. Waiting for you guys to get the mic.
Hi, do you anticipate any change in the mobile browser's support for certain formats? It seems like there's no one format that everyone is going to do.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is interesting, and I didn't really mention this too much, is that on the desktop you have, like, let's take Opera for example. They support WebM, and out of the 3 things that we do, H264, WebM, and HLS, they support WebM. But on mobile, that's actually determined by the hardware. And I know that Firefox has made, I don't know if they've necessarily made an announcement, but they've certainly mentioned in discussion that they want to also go to this this idea of using the hardware to determine what playback they can do instead of doing software, which is what they have now. So you'll definitely see more. I think you'll see more things sort of depending on the hardware to do the playback, which will definitely continue to be HLS. Will we get more WebM stuff? Google certainly hopes so. On the desktop, that's a preferred format, but the hardware is just not there yet. And I think a lot of the people who are making the phones are sort of hesitant to add it. So we'll have to wait and see what will happen in the industry. But certainly H.264 is going to be big. We're seeing more adoption of HLS, and certainly as an employee of Google, we're sort of, I hope that WebM will also sort of emerge and do better too.
Thank you. I had a question about the ability of an author to define like different resolutions of video based on network connections. I mean, back when QuickTime used to have QuickTime reference files, which would allow you to create different versions of videos so that if somebody was on a lower speed connection, they would get like, you know, more poorly compressed video, but they would still be able to see it. Like, I don't see, like, we've got Kodak fallbacks, but I don't see any way to accomplish similar things now.
So right, so the great thing about HLS is that it sort of, it divides your video up into these different qualities and different chunks, and so the browser can decide you know, what quality of video it should be serving based off of how much of it can be drawing. So it's not necessarily, because there are other things that can affect it other than just bandwidth. Maybe your hardware can't handle it. Maybe other things are running in the background. So that's something that'll do it for you kind of automatically.
Okay.
After that, you know, we've made these, you know, we've tried to make assumptions and try to change it based on bandwidth and based on the size of the player. But really the HLS way is the best, I think the best way to do it, because it takes into account everything that's happening on the platform. And I think we're kind of done with time now. We want to give the next speaker time to set up. So thank you all.